Hello and welcome to the first session of Simondon and Technology with Yuk Hui. I'm going to pass the mic off to him now.
Right, so can you all hear me, everyone? Good.
Yeah.
So I think what we are going to do, so why don't we do a very short introduction of ourselves first, and then we can start with Simondon. So I will introduce myself first. My name is Yuk Hui, and I'm teaching at the Institute for Philosophy at Leuphana University in Germany. And I'm also working on a research project called Techno-Ecology of Participation. And since more than 10 years, I have been working on Simondon. So I was invited to give a course with the new center. So I proposed to do to do 4 sessions on Simondon. Right, so anyone want to introduce them briefly?
Maybe I can pass to the first person I see on the list is Alejandro.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm Alejandro Orozco from Mexico City. I work here in the Institute for Critical Studies, and well, I work with some topics about art and philosophy, and mainly French modern and contemporary philosophy. And well, from that I am interested in Simondon. Right. And this is my first course with the new center.
Super, thank you, Alejandro. The next person I have is Andrew.
Hey everyone, is that unmuted? I'm just this is also my first time new center. I've actually just finished my honors level undergraduate studies at university and ended up writing a thesis that I was very interested in the intersections of technological system change, ecologies, and labor. And Simondon kept coming up as a guy who's written in the field. So I did secondary cursory reading all around the topic, but never actually really delved directly into the guy himself. So I wanted to participate here and see what we get out of it. Thanks, guys. Oh, I'm in Sydney, Australia right now. It's very early, 7:15 a.m.
Oh,
so just the first sunrise on my face.
Great, and Eduardo? Oh, we can't hear you, but...
Hi.
Yes, I think we can hear you now.
There is. I am a filmmaker from Mexico City. Right now I am staying a few days in New York. And I like to make films based on theoretical research, even if them sometimes end up being pretty abstract, especially in our relation to technology. And this is my second class at the new center, and the other class I'm taking, we're also reading Simondon, so it's pretty interesting to see him from different perspectives.
Great. And Helena? Can't hear you yet, but I think your mic might not be on. Yeah. No, we still can't hear you. Can you see the icon on the top that?
Now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Yeah, my name is Elena. I'm based in Amsterdam, and I'm PhD student at Utrecht University. I'm working on the concept of modulation and rhythm, and I came to Simondon actually through the work of Yuk Hui. Yeah, my background is also in art, more as curator. So I also work with art as material and discursive objects. And yeah, that's why I was interested on taking this course. It's also my first time.
Great, thank you. And Jacob?
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm Jacob Van Geest. I'm a student at the New Center. I've taken a number of courses through the New Center already, so this is by far not my first. My research interests are located somewhere in the area of the intersection of political theory and technology. I have a master's degree in information science and some interest in the politics of technology. And so I have some interest in Simondon there, though I don't have a lot of background or much knowledge of him at all. But I am quite interested in Deleuze, and my understanding is that there's quite a bit of an intersection between Simondon and Deleuze, and so I'm interested in figuring that out a little bit more, I guess. So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Jacob. And Jessica?
Hi, my name is Jessica Kenny. I'm in Pasadena, California right now. I'm a composer and focused on vocal music, focused on the voice, and have been taking quite a few New Center classes the last few years. And I'm very interested in this lecture today, but I wish I could come to the whole class, but I'll be in Korea the next couple weeks. So yeah, just looking forward to this, and thank you all for being here.
Should I present myself? Yeah. Am I the next in line? Okay. I'm Avind. I'm also a musician, composer, a teacher at Cal Arts too. So is Jessica. She neglected to say that. And for myself, my research interests are also well, mostly centered around music practice, but also with rhythm and historical time and techniques. So I got interested in Stiegler, and also a fan of Yuk Hui's book, Question Concerning Technology in China. So I'm really happy to be a part of this seminar. Thanks.
Thanks. I think you are my Facebook friend, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I enjoyed your last article on efflux too, cosmotech politics.
Super. And Meredith, I know you just hopped in, but do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Let me turn my camera one sec. Hi.
Great.
Hold on. Let me. I'm certificate, and I also read your book recently, and I run a company called Print All Over Me. We do we experiment with sort of different ways to remunerate people for their virtual creations. So I'm really interested in ideas of economy, techniques exchange and in experimenting with different ways to sort of social engineer these relationships and think about them from a more theoretical perspective in a nutshell.
Super. Tegan, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm guessing that's me. Sorry. Sorry, I'm a little sick. My name's Tegan. I don't know how to introduce myself. I guess, hello. I guess I am currently working on projects which work at the intersection of like semiotics, art history. I've been doing a bit of like investigations recently on like materiality, and like investigations surrounding the body, and disability studies. I kind of have like a very wide range of interests right now, and am doing far too many things at once, and eventually going to have to settle down to a few projects. But I haven't reached that point yet, so yeah.
Great. And Tal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Excuse me, hold a second, because I just broke a glass. I have to. I'll be back in.
Okay. All right, so I guess we're waiting for the shards of glass to be cleaned up. So for anyone who hasn't taken a new center course before, it always helps to just make sure that your mic and camera are working a little bit beforehand, and yeah, that's great. Maybe we can continue with the introductions, and then when you gets back, we'll move forward. Terrence, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, sorry, I'm back.
Oh,
hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me now? Because I'm not sure if it's coming out or not.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Terrence Sharp, and I'm an artist and writer. I'm based in Leipzig in Germany at the moment. So I guess what I write about the idealization of human and machine, and what's at stake in considering that in relation to biopolitics as well as contemporary art. And I'm trying to think how I came into contact with Yuk Hui's work. I think it was probably through Mo Salemi, maybe, but like there was an article that Yuk Hui wrote about the revenge of contingency and algorithmic catastrophe, which was really interesting for me. So yeah, that's why I'm taking the class. But it's not my first class at the center.
Super. And Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. G'day everyone. How's it going? I'm in Canberra in Australia at the Australian Centre for Cybersecurity at the Australian Defence Force Academy. And obviously in cybersecurity, we don't really, it's under-philosophized, if you see what I mean. So I guess this book brought me here, and this one, and you can see how fresh that is. So I'm a complete noob in this area. So I look forward to the course and working with you all. One of the great things about the new centre course is that there's such a diverse crew that do them. You always get interesting new perspectives and new friends and stuff. So I look forward to working with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And my name is Theodore. I'm going to be helping moderate the course. So if you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to email me, and I'll try and help you out with whatever technical difficulties you may have. I'm going to pass the mic now to Yuk.
Right, thank you very much, everyone, to be here. Theodore, I have one question. So how long to speak?
We've been for 20 minutes about.
Sorry, how much?
About a little less than 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and then we have discussion. What?
Oh, we.
No, I mean, what? I mean, how long do I expect to? Am I expected to speak?
Oh, you have.
I was told that I speak like 40 minutes, and then there's going to be discussions.
Sure, that we can. It's sort of free form. In a lot of the other classes, the teacher has like an introductory, like 40-minute, maybe a little bit longer lecture, and then we can open it up to discussion after that. That'd be fine.
Right. So thank you again, everyone, to be here. So because it's a little bit late here already, almost 10 o'clock. But anyway, we are going to start with Simondon. May I ask you a question? Did all of you have already read Simondon? Or anyone who has read Simondon a bit? That's the introduction. So most of you haven't read Simondon, which is not a problem. Let's so because this will be this is our first class. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to introduce the work of Simondon, the person Simondon quickly, and then we are going to look into some passages in the introduction, maybe only one paragraph in the introduction, and then we are going to base our discussion, our introduction on this quotation from Simondon. Simondon is a French philosopher who died in 1986. And Simondon hasn't published much before his death. He mainly published 2 books, which were his PhD thesis. At that time in France, if you want to do a PhD or you want to get the doctor degree, you have to do 2 theses: one principal thesis and one supplementary thesis. The principal thesis is called Integration in the light of notions of form and information. That is not yet translated. I know that it is already translated into Spanish, but not yet into German or English. I heard that someone is preparing the English translation, and the supplementary thesis is called on the mode of existence of technical object. So the first book, that is to say, the principal thesis, is a book on the question of individuation. So Simondon wanted to ask, what is individuation? And if with the invention or with the discovery of the notion of form in Gestalt psychology and information in cybernetics, is it possible for us to, based on this new concept, to develop a new understanding of individuation? So this was the topic of the main thesis. So there are 2 concepts very important. We are not going to discuss, but I will just briefly mention, is the question of the good form in Gestalt psychology. And we know that, for example, I think we all have seen this, is that we are giving a picture and we are asked, what do we see in this picture? Is it an old woman or is it a young lady? I think probably all of us have seen a picture like this. So there is something called a good form, which is present in this picture, and this form comes out like on its own. And what is also important in Gestalt psychology is the distinction between the ground and the figure. So there is the ground, which allows things to happen, to appear, and what appears is the figure. Secondly, there is also the notion of information that is discovered, that is proposed by Claude Shannon in his information theory, and it was also used by Norbert Wiener. Even though later we will discuss about this, is that the notion of information in Wiener is very different from the notion of information of Shannon. But basically, this is the thesis, the subject of the first thesis, that is to say, based on the two new concepts in order to develop a new understanding of individuation, which is immediately something that is against what is known as hylomorphism. What is hylomorphism? Hylomorphism is an Aristotelian understanding or Aristotelian theory, which is based on the distinction of, on the one hand, matter, and on the other hand, form. So it is form that gives identity to what is known as inert matter. So matter is always inert, and it is the form that gives identity to matter. So in the case, we can imagine, for example, with brick making. So we have the mold. The mold give identity to the clay, and that gives rise to brick. So this is the old theory, or the obsolete theory of individuation that Simondon want to challenge, because the very question is here: form itself has to be explained through individuation, because a form is always already individuated. So you cannot use something individuated to explain individuation. Now you can only form itself has to be understood through a process of individuation. So that is the subject of the first thesis, that ranges, that is based on three types of being, on the individual, or three types of individuation. Firstly, physical individuation. Secondly, individuation of living being. So, for example, animals, plants. And thirdly, the individuation of what he calls psychical being, which is human. But we are not going to touch so much on the first thesis, on the principal thesis, because it is not yet translated. But maybe in the last lesson, we are going to read the introduction, which is already translated. So, and then we are going to combine what we have touched in the first three lessons regarding the question of technology, and then comes back to the question of individuation. Now, the supplementary thesis on the modes of existence of technical objects was written under the supervision of an epistemologist called Georges Canguilhem. And this book is recently translated. Do I have a copy? Yes, I have the copy here. I think if you don't yet have a copy, it makes sense to buy one, because it is very well made and it's very important to understand Simondon. So these are the two main books of Simondon, and I'm not going to speak much about the one on technical object, because that is the content of our course. Now, Simondon, he published these two books when he was still alive, and now what we have read, or what was published after his death, are mainly, for example, course that what he has written for, what he has prepared for his courses, or collections of papers and articles. So these are the two major works of Simondon that was written in the form of books. Now, in this book on the mode of existence of technical objects, what Simondon wanted to say is very complicated. And this book is divided into three parts. One is on the first part is on the evolution of technical objects, and the second part is on the relation between human being and technical object, and the third part is the most intriguing and the most important part for me, because basically I can say that I developed my first book based on my first book on digital objects based on the first two parts, and my second book on cosmotechnic is very much based on the third part. And this third part is something really puzzling, as I heard that Simondon's supervisor, Georges Canguilhem, was a little bit confused why Simondon wrote something like this, the third part, which is anthropological, at the same time also really speculative. But we'll touch on this subject in the third seminar. Now, in this first seminar, I propose to you to study one sentence from Simondon, and that is all we want to do. Do you all have the book? You have this book? No, your book is okay. Now, well, everyone has PDF. Okay, great. So let's start with this quote, and then I will explain a little bit, and then we can discuss. The quote, you can locate this quote on page number 16 at the bottom. Yeah, I think you all have the. No, don't worry if you don't have the Minnesota. If you don't have the univocal edition, I'm going to read this sentence anyway. So he says, I quote just this paragraph. We would like to show precisely that the robot does not exist, that it is not a machine, no more so than a statue is a living being, but that it is merely a product of the imagination and of fictitious fabrication, of the art of illusion. The notion of the machine as it currently exists in culture, however, incorporates to a great extent this mythical representation of the robot. An educated man would never dare to speak of objects or figures painted on a canvas as genial reality, having interiority, good or ill will. However, this same man speaks of machines as threatening man, as if he attributed a soul and a separate autonomous existence to them, conferring on them the use of sentiment and intention towards men. So this is what we are going to study in this first seminar. Does anyone want to say the interpretation? Or does anyone want to say what you think about this quote?
We want to hear what you think about it.
No, say something, and then I'll explain.
Okay.
I mean, because this quote is really strange, no?
Yeah, I was going to say that the painting, using the painting as a allegory or comparison, it was strange because actually we often do say that a painting will have an attitude towards us. Yeah. So it seemed to kind of show that he has a certain view on what art is.
Right.
Which kind of surprised me.
Right. So that is this. The question of art here is not really the question of art, but rather what he called aesthetic object. So what is an aesthetic object? But we are going to explain that. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to explain this paragraph, or I'm trying to use this paragraph as a starting point to unfold the project of Simondon. Because I believe that in this quote, we can already understand the project of Simondon. Because we know that robots exist and there are more and more robots, no? But why Simondon want to say that robot does not exist? The reason is very simple. He says that there is a kind of misunderstanding of technology. And this misunderstanding of technology leads to mistaken understanding of machines. And that is exemplified in robot. What does it mean by this? It's that robots are understood as servants, as slaves. But the fact that a robot is understood as servant or as a slave is only a fiction. It is only something which is very abstract. And that robot is only understood as utility. So here, let me emphasize on 2 points. One is utility. Now the second point is abstract existence. Now this, in the example of robot, the problem is that Simondon says at the very beginning, there is a misunderstanding and ignorance of technology, the misunderstanding and ignorance of what he called technical reality. Because there is an ignorance of technical reality, that technology is considered to be something abstract, as something that has incarnated the figure of a monster or figure of human. And that is the reason for which that a robot is seen to someone as something threatening. So what Simondon said, we would like to show precisely that a robot does not exist. What it means precisely that Simondon wants to show that we must go beyond the figure of robot as something which is equivalent to human being or something that may replace human being. And this is also still very significant today, because when we talk about robot, when we talk about automation, we always have this feeling, or we always have this fear that robot or machines may replace us, right? So, but Simondon want to say that no, this is not the point. We exactly what you want to do is to demonstrate that this imagination of a robot or this understanding of technology is problematic. And here I want to show something else, is that he want to show another understanding of technology that allows us to, what he says, integrate techniques in culture. Now, this is the main thesis of Simondon, and namely the integration of technology in culture. And what does it mean by saying integrating technology in culture? Is technology not part of culture? Now, this is the question that I pose to you, and I think that it is we have to understand this point really precisely, otherwise we may risk misunderstanding Simondon here. But I will suspend this point. I will come back on this point, namely the integration of techniques in culture. Now the second sentence that Simondon wants to say when he says that an educated man, when he look at the object or figures or on a painting, they will not say that that is a reality. You know, they will not see an equivalence between what is painted and what exists in reality. But it is only with technology that there is this kind of equivalence between human and, or the human and machine, or one part of human that can be replaced by such machine. So here is the problem that Simondon understands is that we have to resolve through the new understanding of technology. Now let me come back to this point, what Simondon wants to say by integration of technology in culture. In culture, is because if in the same introduction, if you have read, you noticed a couple of things. Firstly, Simondon says that since the 18th century, there is an impression that there is rape of nature by technology. So there is rape of nature by technology. And this is one of the, of course, this is related to the whole process of industrialization. And the, which give the impression that technology is in the process of destroying nature. And this is clear. I mean, for example, if you look into the opposition between culture and civilization, which was a topic, a subject, a very important subject in the early 20th century. And this idea, this question that this opposition between nature and technology has actually begun in since the 17th century, for example, in the encyclopedia of Diderot and D'Alembert. In a book called On Philosophy, that is a humorous publication of Simondon, which includes some of the notes that Simondon has written on the mode of existence of technical object, but he didn't publish in his thesis, where Simondon talks about the disappearance of nature, in encyclopedia of Diderot and D'Alembert, and that was the critique of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau says that in the encyclopedia, what you can see is techniques or technology, and there is no role for nature. But we also have to pay attention here, because by nature, Simondon doesn't really mean that, for example, a plateau, a mountain, but rather nature here means element in the sense of the pre-Socrates. The pre-Socratic philosophers, for example, fire, water, apeiron, in the sense of Anaximander. So that is to say, since the 18th century, if not earlier, there is an opposition between nature and technology, and we have the impression that there's a rape of nature by technology. This is one part. The second part is that there is a worry that technology, so for example, there is, when they talk about this, the psychology of the robot, is that that there is a fear that these machines are threatening us. But all this, as Simondon says, originates from a misunderstanding and ignorance of technology. So the whole book, the thesis, the subject of the whole book is the following: that Simondon wanted to develop a different history of technology, and he wanted to, from this history, he wanted to examine why there is an incompatibility between nature, culture, and technology. And by doing this task, by carrying out this task, Simondon wanted to address the question of alienation raised by Karl Marx. Because Simondon believed that Marx, even though has point out the problem of alienation, but there is a problem with Marx analysis, and therefore Simondon suggests another analysis in the history of technology that he outlined in this book. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to explain to you what is the problem, or why Simondon think will be the problem of Marx. And if Marx talks only about alienation of workers, Simondon wants to say that, in fact, there is a double alienation. So on the one hand, there's an alienation of workers. And on the other hand, there is also an alienation of technical object. As you have already read in the introduction, Simondon tried to demonstrate or try to explain his own history of technical objects according to three different entities. First, technical element. So technical element is, or technical element symbolizes the 18th century with this enthusiasm of progress, and progress has no limit, it's infinite. So it is characterized by technical element. And then technical individuals. And technical individuals is something that emerged, that appeared in the 19th century. And then we come back to technical individual very soon. And then the last one is what he called technical ensemble. And technical ensemble is, we can say, a group of machines, a group of technical objects. This group of technical objects may link one with between each other. So, for example, in a laboratory, that there are certain objects are connected. But all these objects in the same laboratory, they create what he called a technical ensemble. For example, a factory is a technical ensemble. Now, Simondon suggests that in order to understand what Marx called alienation, we must examine what he called technical individual. And with the emergence of technical ensemble, maybe we can find a way to resolve the problem raised or produced by the emergence of technical individual. I don't know if this is clear, probably not. But let's look into what is technical individual. And then we will look into the second part of individuation, that is to say, the individuation of technical object. Now, what is a technical individual? We can simply say that a technical individual is an autonomous machine. When Simondon explained what is technical individual, he says it is a machine which has its what he called an associate milieu. That means it has a mechanism which allows it to stabilize itself. But with the technical object, we are coming back to the question of a detailed examination of Simondon's concept of technical objects in the second seminar. But here we just have to know that for Simondon, a technical individual is which is situated in Marx's critique of alienation are automated machines in the factory, for example. As we know that according to the analysis of Marx, when the workers, for example, the artisans, when they have to give up their work, before industrialization, they all have their studio, they all have their workshop. But at the very beginning of industrialization, these workers or these artisans are forced to give up their workshop and enter into factories, right? By entering into the factories, these artisans have to give up their own skills, to give up their own knowledge. We're working in the factory, that is, they're working with these machines. They don't really have knowledge of how this machine works. They still thought that, or they still have the mentality to work with the machines as if they are working with the different tools in the workshop. So Simondon says that when the artisans are in the workshop, and when they deal with their tools, they create an associate milieu for these different tools and for himself. So in this case, the artisan is himself a technical individual. But this is no longer the case in the factories of the 19th century. The artisan, which is now a worker, he still thought that he can deal with these machines in the way like he was dealing with the different technical tools. But as we know, this is no longer the case. So it produced a kind of what Simondon says, a malaise, a illness when dealing with these automatic machines, because the worker is now forced to operate with the machines according to, firstly, predefined procedures, and secondly, rhythms of the machine. Now, this for Simondon is the source of alienation. It is the source of alienation. It is also because that the worker does not have technical knowledge to deal with the machine. The worker works with the machine, but when there is a problem, then you have technicians. The technician will come and fix the machine. Now, this is this is a more fundamental problem of alienation. And Simondon says that, and at this point, he criticized Marx by saying that Marx tried to analyze alienation according to an economic analysis. But in fact, Marx has ignored something which is more fundamental than economic categories. Because in the analysis of machine, of production, machines are considered as fixed capital. What is fixed capital is an economic category. But Simondon says that no, actually, there is something which is more fundamental than economic category, and Marx has ignored. So if we understand that the question of economy is like what Marx himself says, calls a superstructure, there is also the base, and this base is something that Marx himself has ignored, and this is the fundamental relation between human and machine. And in the case of industrialization, that the example we have just explained, the relation between the worker and the machine. And this is the real problem of proletarialization, according to Simondon as well as Stigler. Now, this is the alienation of the worker. On the other hand, there is also the alienation of technical object. And this alienation of technical object is not something that Simondon has not discussed in his book on the mode of existence of technical object, but in another article in a course which is called social psychology of technicity. Social psychology of technicity. And in this article, in this course, Simondon explains, or he make it explicit what he means by alienation of technical object. Or we can say, maybe we can summarize the alienation of technical objects in two parts. Firstly, is that, for example, in the example that we have just discussed, that in the factory, the worker doesn't know how to deal with the machine, because he does not have the technical knowledge to prolong the life of the machine beyond its creation. So he or she simply treats the machine as a slave. Now, the second aspect of alienation of technical objects is due to the fact of is due to consumerism. And consumerism is based on overproduction, because of overproduction, the capitalism has to promote consumerism and to stimulate the desire of buying. But in this example, in what Simondon called alienation of technical objects, is that he says that these technical objects, after they are produced, they are not used immediately. So their functionality or their utility is suspended. Instead, these objects are displayed in the market, waiting to be bought. He says it's like in the Roman time, that the slaves have to wait in the market until he is chosen by a future master. So it is very intriguing here when Simondon compares the technical objects with slaves in the Roman time. So these are the two aspects of alienation of technical objects, and also we have seen before the question, the alienation of worker, which is produced by technological development. Do you have questions so far? Anyone has questions so far?
If anyone does, please feel free to put something in the sidebar and then I can switch to your camera if you'd like.
No one has questions. I hope that people are still there. Right, so this is what the two aspects of the question of alienation that that we have briefly covered. Now, what Simondon wanted to suggest further is a subject that he called, or a discipline that he called, or actually it's not him, but was already proposed by someone like, how does this concept of double alienation not reinforce the equivalence of, I don't really understand the question because the question disappeared. Who raised the question? Maybe you want to speak?
Jessica, do you want to say something? And then
that was me. Yeah, I mean, I could have phrased that better, but I'm just trying to understand how the robot does not exist. The robot is not a human, and yet it experiences alienation as under the conditions of the slave, but not necessarily of the worker as such. I mean, how this kind of alienation experienced by the technical object is kind of, how is that not equivalent to the labor power of the human worker?
So you see, you think that in a way Simondon, even though he wanted to criticize the way of understanding human as equivalent of robot as equivalence of human being, but on the other hand, he kind of justify in his critique.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very intriguing question. I have written an article, and this article, it is called "The Question of the Soul in Technical Object." But my article was rejected by all the Simondonians. They said that it's crazy. But I don't think I think that you are right, because in a way the Simondon kind of give a soul to technical objects, especially in this example, when he compare technical objects in the market, it's like slaves in the market. No? But when Simondon says that robot does not exist, he wanted to, I mean, we have to probably, in order to resolve this paradox that you have raised, maybe we have to go one step further, is that it is true that Simondon seems to have given, having given a soul to technical object, or at least he tried to hint on the question of the soul of technical objects. But it is difficult to prove this. There's many analogies that we can find, but it is hard to prove, but because he didn't make it explicit. But what Simondon wants to say here is that robot does not exist, is that we have to break, or we have to go beyond this understanding or this imagination of robot is something which is equivalent to human being. And how can we do this? Now, the only thing we can do this is that we study what is inside this thing or this object, which is called robot. So we have to understand the robot not as an abstract entity, like, for example, something which has taken the form of human being, but rather to understand the technology or the technical reality inside the robot, and to think a fundamental relation between human and technical objects. Now here, in the same introduction, your doubt or your paradox, the paradox that you raised, is affirmed again. When Simondon talks about the relation between human and machine, I don't know if you remember, that was the end of the introduction, he talks about the human and object, technical object relation by referring to an analogy between the director of the orchestra and musician. I don't know if you remember this passage. Is that Simondon when he says human beings are permanent organizers of technical objects, and then he has this he gives this image, this utopian image of the relation between humans and technical objects, like the worker, like the director of the orchestra and the musician, and there is a reciprocal relation between the two, between the director and the conductor and the musician. There is a reciprocity, and there is also resonance between them. So it is so. I think that the paradox that you raise is makes a lot of sense, and that is what I'm trying to show in this article, which was rejected by many people concerning the soul of technical objects. But nonetheless, it is there is another reading. Yeah, I think that someone else says it's the question of postthesis. Is the question of postthesis, that means how can we organize these technical objects, which are postthesis, in a way that is not on the first point, that is not replacement of human being. Secondly, that is not a slave of human being. But here Simondon didn't, and when it is very clear, he didn't discuss about the question of postthesis. He didn't talk about the question of postthesis explicitly, even though it is well, it is arguable, but he didn't talk so precisely about question of postthesis. But he, of course, he was very much aware of this question of postthesis, because in 1961, Simondon invited Norbert Wiener to give a conference on the question of information in France. It was 1961, and the subject of Wiener's conference is on postthesis. So this is maybe something I can resolve. Where at some time I can affirm the paradox that you raise, but on the other hand, let's see how to go through or go beyond this understanding or imagination, social imagination of robot as a slave, and in order to understand how this how it works, how machine works, and how the technological development in the future will be able to address the question of this kind of harmonic relation between the conductor and the musician that Simondon has described here. Any other questions? Well, I think it's better that we discuss, because that would be more interesting, and then we can also tie the question of the Simondon raised to our contemporary situation.
Terence, did you have a question on alienation that you wanted to ask earlier?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No, what I wanted to ask about could you just go over the points about alienation in relation to technical objects again? Because I thought that seemed a little bit, I think maybe I didn't quite get what your assessment of it, because that seems to me, okay, so first of all, if the robot doesn't exist, I guess what Simondon is saying is that the robot doesn't exist in terms of us like trying to anthropomorphize it, and this can obviously go for like artificial intelligence as well. So wait, can you just go over again, how do we talk about alienation in relation to technical objects, considering that we're not meant to anthropomorphize them in any way?
Well, the question of alienation, as I said, is when Marx in this book, Simondon invokes Marx again by saying that Marx's understanding of alienation in terms of, for example, surplus labor, not the production of surplus value, through the production of surplus labor. And the production of surplus labor is also produced by the reduction of the necessary labor through investment in automation. That is what we know as what Marx says in The Fragments of Machines. Simondon says, but this analysis is not enough to understand alienation, because Marx has ignored something which is more fundamental, which he says the continuity between human being, human individual, and technical individual is the continuity or the and discontinuity between human individual and technical individual. And what does he really mean by that? The continuity, discontinuity between human individual and technical individual is because that for Simondon, if you have read, as I said before, that Simondon proposed evolution of technical objects in terms of firstly technical element, and then technical individual, and finally technical ensemble. So let's focus firstly on technical individual. As I said before, that we can just take it as automated machine. Now the automated machine is like for example, it's like a robot. We can imagine a robot in the factory. And this robot is functioning on its own, right? As I said before, when the worker, before the worker become a worker, he was an artisan. An artisan who used simple tools like, for example, hammer, nail, and all sorts of simple tools like that. And the artisan was able to create what he called an associated milieu for this technical object, these tools. So it's like he knows how to coordinate with them as if he creates a totality with these tools. So in this sense, the artisan is also a technical individual. But with the technical individual, that is to say, automated machines appear in the 19th century. Now we see that in the technical object, technical individual, we see in the technical individual that the technical object or the machine possesses its own associated milieu. And so before it was the artisan who produced associated milieu with its object, with its tools. But in the case of the industrial technical individual, and we have to pay attention here, that the technical individual is produced in the process of industrialization. In the technical individual, industrial technical individual, we can see that it possesses itself a technical an associated milieu. Now, in this case, in this situation, there are a few problems. One problem is that, firstly, the artisan, who is now a worker, when he works with a machine, he actually doesn't know how to work with them, because he's only performing the predefined procedures and subsume itself or submit itself to the rhythm of the machine. And here is the second point, that he or she does not have technical knowledge to take care of the machines or what Simondon says, to prolong the machine beyond its creation and production. No? And indeed, because the worker does not have knowledge how these machines work, and he only had to repeat what he was told to do, he simply treats these machines as monsters which wanted to replace them, or as technical individuals that a bit like robot, you know, we said before, that treats them as slaves. And this produced what Simondon called a psychosomatic problem of the workers. On the perspective of capitalists, the capital doesn't know what is happening there, because capital only aims at efficiency, instead, without understanding the problem inside the technical reality. So this is the source, the fundamental source, or fundamental cause of alienation, according to Simondon. An economy is only what amplifies such alienation. So economy is not the fundamental cause in this case, but only what amplifies this form of alienation. Is it clear? Is it better now?
Yeah, I get what you were saying now. Thanks.
Okay, good. So now with the problem that Simondon has analyzed, he wanted to suggest that we need to envisage what he called a mechanology, and this mechanology will compose what he called a mechanologist, will be someone like a philosopher, sociologist, technician, who knows how to, who on the one hand understand the social reality, and on the other hand understand technical reality, and he can find a way to organize machines in a new way. And this was the hope of Simondon. And this hope of Simondon has to be updated, of course, today, according to the situation that we have today, that is to say, computer network. And that is precisely the motivation of my first book, which was partly part of my PhD thesis, to address this question. That's to say this, to address this hope raised by Simondon concerning another way of organization of technical objects to overcome alienation. But the question that there is another question. Another point that Simondon has raised is the question of technical knowledge. Because in order to become a mechanologist, one needs to acquire technical knowledge. But what does it really mean by technical knowledge? It's a question we have to ask today as well. Because I think there is an ignorance of the question of technical knowledge today in our education system as well, because technical knowledge is simply understood as repairing a machine, as programming, but this is fun enough. We need a new program to think about technical knowledge. And so that is why I think, because one of you is study information science, and he come to the seminar, that is, that is a very good or maybe that is one of the examples we can think of a new program for technical knowledge, which is not simply about, or which cannot be reduced to reparation of machines or programmation. But this is basically the basic thesis of Simondon concerning the question of alienation. So the point that we start with the question of robot does not exist is as you said before, that we have to go beyond, or we have to undo the anthropomorphic understanding of machines, and the only way to do so is to understand what Simondon calls technical reality. Technical reality. And by understanding or studying technical reality, you can really address the question, the problem that is associated with alienation.
I think Andrew had a question. Andrew, you want to come in?
Yeah. I just wanted to, I suppose, push a little bit back against the primacy that Simondon wants to afford to his kind of his form of technical alienation. The way that you're presenting it, you're suggesting that the alienation between the technical individual and the worker is somehow prior to or more fundamental than the economic alienation. I'm just wondering, given however that alienation is not possible if it weren't first for the economic coercion of artisans and peasants into factories. It seems to me that, on both an anthropological and possibly an ontological basis, it would be nevertheless that it's the economic relation and one of specifically of coercion and proletarianization that is necessary in order for the technical alienation to actually occur. So yeah, I'm just wondering if there's what justification Simondon would provide to actually for his notion of like the primacy of technical alienation over and before the economic alienation. Yeah.
Well, that is a good question. The question of first of all, of course, the relation between economy and technological developments and investments are related. But the point is not that. The point is rather that if we look at how Marx analyzed machines and the process of production of surplus value, it is clear that in the analysis of Marx, machines are economic categories. And this is the same in the analysis of socialist collective project, as well as in accelerationism that many people are talking about today. And what Simondon wants to say is that, look, it is true that economy is important, is very important, because it is the background. It is also the base where the production of surplus value is situated. But there is something that is more fundamental, which is, we can say, psychosomatic. There is an aspect which is psychosomatic, which is individual, which is personal, that happened in the site of production. That is to say, in the factory. And this is what he called when he says that, besides of the juridical and economic category that Marx has attributed to machines. We need another a further analysis, no? And of course, here we have to also pay attention to the fact that Simondon is not an anti-capitalist. Simondon is not a communist. Simondon didn't say that he wanted to overthrow capitalism. He wanted to realize communism. No, that is not his premise. What Simondon wants to say is that of course there are problem of capital, and there's also the factory, but he believed that it is possible, nonetheless, to overcome alienation from the perspective of technology. So you can, maybe someone will say that with Simondon there is a technical optimism. But we can see that capitalism, whether it is capitalism or not, is not a huge problem, or is not the central concern of Simondon. And if you read Stigler, it is also not a central concern of Stigler, because capitalism or not is not an issue there. No? Is it clear now?
Yeah, that's clear. It also just does crystallize a kind of further, I guess, question I have then about Simondon's approach towards political economy. And you mentioned that he's not forthrightly an anti-capitalist. What kind of political economic situation would you say is congruent with Simondon's kind of utopia, or Simondon's state of post-alienation? Is it one that's congruent with capitalist relations? Is it one that's more akin to like what people talk about when they talk about networked individualism, communalism? Yeah.
Well, this is still something that has to be, that's something that has to be pushed further in the work of Simondon. And I think, for example, in the work of Stigler, he's trying to push it much further. He's trying to deliver an interpretation of Simondon beyond what Simondon himself has said regarding consumerism, regarding alienation, regarding proletarialization. And it is very, it's always the problem is that Simondon didn't publish much. When he was alive, he only published these 2 books, and the rest of them are collections of essays or notes for his courses. But fundamentally, I think that we have to recognize that Simondon is, we can say, an epistemologist. What he concerns is epistemology, and he does not really provide kind of socialist vision or anarchist vision of society. What he tried to say, or what he tried to locate, or try to do, is to locate the source of alienation, and not in economy, the incompatibility between technology and culture. You see what I mean? So this is his starting point. The starting point is not unlike Marx, that starts with the analysis of the process of production, circulation, so on and so forth. Now, Simondon wanted to start with something different, which is the understanding of technology. Now, we have to let open such interpretation of the question of alienation, because that, of course, the Marxian will reject this immediately. Says that as you said, you know, if alienation is fundamentally an economic activity. But I think that it would be also interesting, and we also have to give space to different interpretation, which starts from a different starting point, and that is Simondon's starting point is from what he called the misunderstanding and ignorance of technology in our culture. But we have to also to pay attention that Simondon is not a technocrat. No, he's not producing a technocratic philosophy. Instead, what Simondon wants to say is that we have to, in order to overcome alienation, we have to develop a deepened understanding of machines, or what you call technical realities, and then to resituate the technical, what he called the process of concretization in what he called the genesis of technicity. But that will be something that we only discuss in the third seminar.
Elena, did you want to ask a question as well?
No, I think my question is already answered, because I was thinking all the time about that Simondon's position is an epistemological position. So I was wondering if it was possible to think only on that, but I think you just said that yes, that Simondon's problem is or the way Simondon posed the question of alienation is through epistemology, no? Through the access to the knowledge of the machine, right? Yeah. So that was, yeah.
Yes, no, yeah. I think that so, for example, the question of epistemology is very important for Simondon, and we can say that probably there is a political. There's also the politics of epistemology there. But the question of epistemology is much stronger in his book on individuation. No? When for example, we are going to read in the read in the fourth seminar, the introduction to the I forgot what I'm going to say. We're going to focus the fourth seminar on the introduction to his book on his individuation, and towards the end of this book, you will read you will read the sentence. He says that the knowledge of individuation is the individuation of knowledge. The knowledge of individuation is the individuation of knowledge. Now, so this is a fundamentally epistemological question, the question of individuation. But in the technical objects, of course, it is it is also the question of it is also the question of epistemology, that that has guided Simondon to develop his critique and develop his his program of mechanology. Someone has raised a question that sounds really interesting, but the question disappeared. How can I find it again?
I can pull up.
Yeah, Andrew has said, what do you want to say about this ontogenesis?
Oh, no, I was just more so making the comment rather than a question. I was just surprised that your focus on Simondon's and epistemological approach, because as I just noted previously, I've just been exposed to his writing as more ontological in character. I guess something that's akin to also the work in science and technology studies, particularly like Karen Barad's a genteel realism, and I was kind of seeing it through that lens. But yeah, no, I'm just
you have to
just a remark. Yeah.
Now this is always a question that I put forward to my students. In this case, you have to explain to me what you understand by ontology and ontogenesis. Now, many people who talk about ontogenesis of Simondon didn't really understand this term at all. So maybe you want to say how do you understand of ontology and ontogenesis in Simondon?
Yes. So I suppose to put it really briefly, I understood it as as something that pushes against the Aristotelian notion of that categorizes things according to a pre-formulated identity, and instead looks towards a mode of a relational understanding of entities as things that are constantly things whose identity is constantly emerging and crystallizing through their relation with other things. So it's a ontology of becoming, I suppose, as opposed to being. That's how I approached it, and so yeah, that's
right. But here it is possible to say that in Simondon there is an ontology of relations, but the question of relations is itself also an epistemological question. No, because what is ontology? Ontology in the Aristotelian sense means being qua being, being as being. And we can say that in the, for example, in Aristotle, the question of being is also closely related to the question of categories. The categories, that is to say that the substance and my accident. That's Aristotle has described, but also as well as in metaphysics. But Simondon here, the question of relation is ontological, but it is also an epistemological question. Why? Because the question of relation of Simondon seems to come from Gaston Bachelard, an epistemologist, philosopher of science, metaphysician who knows everything. But when Gaston Bachelard, they were Simondon as well as Bachelard could be identified as philosophers who try to address the new epistemology related to quantum physics. So that is why that Bachelard says that the question or the notion of substance the notion of substance is dangerous. And he says that at the beginning there was relation. You know that in Genesis we read at the beginning there was the word. But Bachelard says at the beginning there was relation. And so, because if you look into quantum physics, there is no. We find that what is more fundamental is relation, and therefore, when Simondon, in his book on individuation, he says that we can even understand the Kantian notion of noumenon in terms of relation. So it is true that there is a kind of ontology of relation, and myself, I try to show it from a different way in my book on digital object. But we see that this question of ontology is not separable from the question of epistemology. That is to say, the question of knowing. And the question of knowing is important and significant in Simondon's work. And what is called ontogenesis is, in ontogenesis, we know that in biology, ontogenesis is about, for example, the development of an individual. For example, in embryology, you can see that how the egg develop and the individual is produced. So this is associated with Simondon, notion of operation, as something that is against the Aristotelian understanding of hylomorphism. But it will be problematic to say that to develop an argument between ontology and epistemology in this case, because it is we can say that it is because of the epistemological understanding or discovery, for example, of information, of form. But of course, it is also related to the question of the very existence, and that is the question of ontology of information and the good form that allows Simondon to develop a new understanding. So it is not productive to make such an opposition between epistemology and ontology in this case. Any other questions? No, the question of the bachelor, I think that I think I have in my book. I just looked up my book. I think it's in an article called Noumen et microphysique. Wait. Yeah, right. It is called. I'm trying to give you the reference. That is from Bachelor. Noumeno and microphysics. I also discussed that in my book on the existence of digital object in the introduction. No, but do you still have questions concerning the interpretation of alienation. Because the question of alienation is the first question, is the motivation of Simondon's work on the modal existence of technical object.
Hi, can I jump in there?
Sorry?
Sure. Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. So you clarified there what you meant by alienation in terms of Marx, in terms of the proliferation of technology that man had to work with once he left his workshop and went into the factory. That alienation, okay, I get that now, and maybe this will move on to like the technical ensemble a little bit, but what can we say about alienation in relation to human-machine dialectics when we're looking at new innovations in technology such as like machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine intelligence, because maybe those things present something new to talk about in terms of alienation.
Yes, I think that well, the question is that Simondon didn't, well, someone else asked a question, but there is probably no question of, well, we'll come back to the question of individuation and alienation, but I think you are right in the way that with machine learning and so on and so forth, how is it possible for us to think of the question of alienation today? And this is what I want to discuss with you in the second seminar regarding cybernetics. Because it's a big question, and it is a very important question to continue the discussion on cybernetics. Now, Simondon was a reader of cybernetics. He's not only a reader of cybernetics, he also wanted to develop what he called universal cybernetics. A universal cybernetics, which is beyond cybernetics of Norbert Wiener, and it also has the aim to respond to the question of alienation. Now, what is a universal cybernetics? We are going to explore in the second seminar, and we have to address some more contemporary questions like machine learning, like artificial intelligence, because I think that the question of machine learning, of artificial intelligence, and or even with the question of computability, which was developed in the first half of the 20th century, has to be reviewed and raised in parallel with what Simondon has said, because we know that the Simondon's book was written in 1950, was published in 1958. So it's really a book that was written 60 years ago. And it is important that we have to bear in mind that when we are reading Simondon, we have to always try to bring Simondon to actuality. And I have to say that many of the things Simondon has said in the book is already obsolete, are not so useful. So we have to, on the one hand, to understand some genuine questions or some real questions, important questions that Simondon raised in this book. But on the other hand, we also have to update Simondon because it was written 60 years ago. It was 2 years after the beginning of artificial intelligence, meaning the conference in Dartmouth, the first conference on artificial intelligence. But yes, we will come back to the question of cybernetics again, or more precisely in the second seminar, and I will propose you to read together a text by Simondon called Technical Mentality, which is already translated. Now, if the question of individuation and alienation is a question that is not addressed by Simondon. The relation between alienation and individuation is rather a question that was addressed by Stigler. Why? Because if you read the first book, the principal thesis of Simondon and the supplementary thesis of Simondon, you find that there is a gap between the two. Because the first book is about individuation, but the second book is about individualization. So you have individuation and we have individualization. And individualization is always, we can say, a psychosomatic schematization. It's about schematization, structuralization, but that is not individuation. When Simondon talked about technical objects, and I will suggest you to read you have time to read the first part of Simondon's on the modes of existence of technical objects. You will find the word individualization, but not individuation. So the evolution from technical elements to technical individual is a process of individualization is concretization. As a concretization, that is the that is what. So that is to say, we have individuation, that is the main thesis in the subject in the principal thesis, and we have individualization, which is the subject of the first part of the on the modal existence of technical object. But we have to say the question of individuation only comes back in the book on technical objects in the third part, when Simondon talks about what he called the genesis of technicity. But this will be something we will talk in the third seminar. It is rather Stigler who proposed the question of how to make a link between alienation and individuation, because for him, Stigler developed a concept of individuation which is based on the model of what Simondon has described, but from a different perspective of psychoanalysis. Simondon was a reader of Jung, but not Freud. Simondon criticized Freud by following Jung. But Stigler has proposed a reading of individuation from the perspective of Freud. And so for him, individuation is always investment, a libidinal investment. A libidinal investment that is able to produce a philia, that is to say, love of the self and the other. And that can also produce what he called or Simondon calls a quantic leap. Individuation is always a quantic leap from one status to another. And therefore, Stigler proposed what he called disindividuation. A disindividuation. But the disindividuation for Simondon means something else. For Stigler, disindividuation means the incapability to individuate. So we cannot individuate. If the incapability of individuating oneself is because that one cannot transform. Sorry, when I see the question, I got when I saw Jessica's question, I got this interrupted. Maybe I should turn off the group chat there. Okay, good. So for Stigler, this individuation means the incapability to individuate. So, for example, I cannot invest in myself in order to go beyond myself. But for Simondon, this individuation only means a process of destructuralization in the process of individuation. So this individuation is one phase of individuation for Simondon. And therefore, there is a, if you are looking for a relation between individuation and alienation, it is more fruitful or it is more productive in the work of Stigler than in Simondon. So, for example, when we say that the artisan and the peasants are forced to enter factory, and that leads to the loss of knowledge. And furthermore, that the worker does not acquire new knowledge besides of repeating the same gesture. This leads to the incapability of individuating oneself. And this is what Stigler understands as one of the sources or one of the reasons of, or one of the aspects of proletarialization. So you become a proletariat not because you don't have money, but because you have lost your knowledge and you have lost your capacity to individuate. And of course, this is also the same with the question of consumerism. But on the question of individuation, I would like to discuss and focus on in the last seminar. Now, there is another question from Jessica. What is the question?
Jessica, do you want to come in and ask your question?
It's actually Amy's question.
Yeah, we're on the same line at the moment. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking through alienation regarding Marx and Feuerbach in terms of the alienation of man from God and the projection of humankind's best qualities of love and so forth into a radical exterior of religion. How does the technical or alienation of the technical object fit into that kind of a model? In other words, where is the religious category in the technical?
It is now. Let me try to understand better your question. So you are saying, but that is a very good question. So you are saying that the theological alienation, like the self-produced alienation, according to Feuerbach, and how does this relate to alienation of technical object?
Yeah.
I think that, like, for example, where I think that we can say that if for Feuerbach the alienation, for example, religion as what the cause of, well, religion for Feuerbach is the cause of alienation, and capital for Marx. No? But this, on the one hand, we can say that, like the production or like the fabrication of God, that human produce or fabricates the image of robot as a being that is competing with himself. Huh? So this is one of the, we can say, this is one of the analogy, or one of the relation we can develop, because it is true today. You know, if we think about, for example, the discussion that we have today around automation everywhere in the world, because I just in the past month I just had a conference tour that I went to the US, I went to California, I went to Asia, and then come back to give a talk in London at the ICA. And I was not surprised that in all of my conferences, everyone was asking about replacement of human by machines. So I think that it is the question of, in this perspective, you know, like the fabrication of robot as a threatening image that is analogical to the question of God in the alienation described by Feuerbach. Now the question is that, of course, not only to the question of emancipation. If we see in Simondon, the question of emancipation is has taken a completely different direction, which is to be back, or to go into what they call the technical reality, into to acquire the knowledge, or to understand how machines function, and the principles that are employed in these machines, in order to think what kind of organization can we have. Does it respond to your question at all? I think you probably have to unmute.
Yeah, it responds. I think I have to think about the not anthropomizing the robot more in this context, and just maybe take another week to
because like Simondon says, Simondon proposed maybe you can say a third type of alienation here, that as we said before, religion according to Feuerbach and capital according to Marx, and in Feuerbach, alienation is explained as the separation between God and human, and which God is the result of the self-alienated progression of human, the Garton's vessel, the species essence. And of course, for Marx, is the question of surplus value, as we said before, produced by mechanism of capital and the paid work. But Simondon, of course, he proposed a kind of another perspective of alienation, that we have discussed before, is more or less, as I said before, the psychosomatic perspective, psychosocial somatic and somatic perspective. But so the question of anthropomorphosis, I think that this is my thesis, is that if we start with the question of anthropomorphosis, that is to say, the replacement of human by machine, we will not go anywhere. We will only worry about what will not be replaced by machines. We will only worry what kind of jobs can remain. But these are not productive because, it is like speculating what machine cannot do, and there is no way to speculate what machine cannot do, because it is a matter of time. So it is not productive to start with anthropomorphic understanding of machine. And by saying so, I mean that we have to develop a new understanding of technical object. And I think that was what Simondon tried to say. And even though it is not completely satisfactory and not completely clear, but it allows us to develop new interpretations of Simondon and to push this further, instead of remaining in what I called a pure Simondonian reading. And pure Simondonian reading is the worst in the world that we can have. Now there is another question. Oh, there is something from Tom. Do you want to say something, Tom? Because I don't understand what you have written at all.
Oh, I don't need to necessarily say anything. I guess you probably answered my comment with your latter statement, I suspect, in terms of what is his original contribution in terms of us looking back at the last 60 years and looking forward. So you probably answered that in your final comments there, I suspect. Thank you.
Ah, yeah, okay, good.
Yep.
Well, right now we're about 12 minutes till the end of the class time. Perhaps we can talk about what you would like us to do in preparation for next week.
I think well, I don't know how much time you have for reading, but at least what I will propose that there is a basic reading that everyone should read, that I expect everyone should read is Technical Mentality. Do you know this article? Technical Mentality. So I think with this technical mentality, we are going to address a few questions. One is the question of cybernetics. Second, the question, thank you very much, Terence. And secondly, the question of alienation. And third, the question of automation. And because, Simondon says that automation is the lowest in technicity. But what Simondon understands as automation is not what we understand as alienation today in 2017. What Simondon understands as automation in the 1950s is what we see, for example, in the movie of Charlie Chaplin. It's not the alienation that we have today. No, sorry, it's not the automation that we have today. So I hope that, but this text technical mentality will be really important for us. But I will also urge you to read the first part of on the mode of existence of technical objects. But if you don't have time, please do read carefully the article Technical Mentality. Or do you have any other questions, or you're thinking that if you have any suggestion how we can structure our seminar, you are also welcomed. So technical optimism is way of saying, because there are people saying that Simondon believe in that technology can solve all the problem. That by going back to technical objects, then we can solve the question of alienation. But I have to say that this is a misunderstanding of Simondon, because as we are going to read in the third seminar, we are going to do in the third seminar, we will see very clearly that the question of technology is not enough, or what do we say, technological thought or technological thinking is not enough for Simondon. That is exactly what he says. Technological thinking has to be accompanied by other type of thinking. But it is true, that it's also not without reason when people say there's a kind of optimism in Simondon, because he believed that, through certain profound understanding of technology, we can respond to the question of alienation. But we will see this clearly, or more clearly, in the coming seminars. But again, back to the question, do you have any suggestion how to structure the seminar, or please let me know. In fact, I was a little bit sleepy because it was late, but next time I have more energy.
One question I know for people who are taking the class who are certificate course members, my understanding is that there's normally some kind of submission or something like that, some project end game situation that we're supposed to work on. Is there anything you have in mind for that yet? Or
I think, Theodor, do you want to answer the question?
Yeah, typically there's a final assignment, and that's to be decided upon between the student and the instructor as well. So it's quite flexible.
Mm. Well, that's also good that each student giving a short presentation at the end. And that can be also a good. Yeah, well, why don't we do this? The next time. Or is it a good way of doing? How about this? That someone, maybe two of you, can present the text in the next seminar. What do you think? So, for example, we can do, for example, a 15 minutes presentation of the text. No? If anyone want to do it? Okay. So Terence can do it. Good. Yeah, if there's another person, then you can also work together, or you can help each other. The text itself is very short. But of course, if someone else wanted to present the basic question of the first part of the more existence of technical object is also welcomed, which is even more challenging. But otherwise, I also have some note. I can try see if I have the technical object. Yeah, I mean, for the coming week, I mean, if you have time, please read Technical Mentality, which is very important. And if you have more time, please also read the first part of on the modal existence of technical object. So. Good, so we have 2 persons. Great. Okay. So in between, if you have a question, you are welcome to write to me, or if you have a suggestion, you can also write to me. Right. Great.
All right. Any closing remarks or? All right. I'll stop the broadcast.
Right. So otherwise, then maybe we can end today here.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks.